Our customers compete with anyone when it comes to hyperscale and efficient hardware.
How do you lead that?
Number one reason a company fails is they don't get market transitions.
Absolutely. I think the industry is going through a tremendous transformation.
Hi, Anukool. How are you?
Doing well. Nice to meet you, Steve.
Very, very nice to meet you as well, and thank you for having us here at your beautiful offices today. Tell me a little bit about the history of Guavus. How long has it been around, for example?
Sure. So, well, you know, sometimes I joke that half my life I've been doing Guavus, because the origins of Guavus as a company was founded 8 years ago, but the origins of Guavus go back to work that I was doing as part of my PhD, so that's roughly a decade ago.
Wow.
So, you know, we were, I guess, before big data existed as a phrase, before data science was a buzzword, we were tackling some problems which now have become the core technology that Guavus has commercialized.
So you had a certain amount of foresight about what you're working on in your PhD.
Well, like in everything else, you know, right place, right time, but I was struck by the kind of problem. So a lot of the work that I did as part of my PhD was done at Sprint Labs.
Right.
And back then, you know, the Sprint Advanced Technology Labs, you know, had a crazy idea that, hey, let's go put instrumentation in our network, and if you could put that instrumentation to collect data about what our subscribers are doing, we could be a lot smarter. We could engineer the network better. We could treat our customers in a very effective manner. We could be smart about how we do promotions. But that was the idea, right? 10 years ago, before you know, instrumentation technology, before DPI existed, before, as I said, big data existed, and I was lucky enough to be at the right place in the right time, and through the process have a fantastic set of research results, get a PhD, and then, you know, get the opportunity to commercialize it in Guavus.
Well, Guavus seems to be going through a terrific period of success. Like much of the next generation communications industry itself, it's you know, tell us what's been going on recently. You've had some customer wins, some new investment, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the last 7-8 months have been very busy for us in a good way. We've signed up 10 new design wins in the last 7 months, and you know, the kind of customers that we work with are the tier 1 carriers. So I hope to be able to continue to repeat that feat, but you know, that's unprecedented in our history.
It's very unusual for to get that many wins in a short space of time with tier 1s. How long is the sales cycle into that type of customer?
Well, you know, it's changing a lot, because you know, when Guavus was, again, as I said, in the early days, customers weren't really sure what all this big data stuff meant, right? In the early days, a lot of our sales were evangelical in nature. Hey, there's value if you can take this data from the network and mash it up with customer data and really provide valuable insights. So they were very evangelical in nature, and therefore the sales cycle was, as you can imagine, you know, the CTO sale, the engineer sale, and kind of getting the carriers to look at data as a first-class citizen, look at data as an asset. What's evolved, you know, so that's where we started off. And then what happened was this phrase big data came up, right? And then everybody was a big data company. And we went from, you know, me flying coast to coast to talk to an engineer and evangelize to them, to, you know, the chief strategy officer coming to our office and saying, hey, Guavus, help me become a data company. So everybody suddenly wanted to become a data company, and everybody was a big data company. And now what's happened is, you know, in the last, I would say, 12, 18 months, that set of kind of maturity is setting in, where many of these telcos have understood the value of data. They've become very data aware. They've always been very data rich, but now they've become data aware, and they're starting to make investments. And that's why we're seeing a lot of pull from customers right now, whereas in the early days it was a lot of Guavus pushing.
And it was also, it went through a period when it was very frothy, didn't it? There was a lot of hype, and everybody, as you say, I mean, the term big data itself has almost been corrupted by overuse. So,
I agree.
I mean, most people don't. Do you talk about yourself as a big data company?
Not anymore, not anymore. So I did that, and it's funny, you know, one day we had a marketing workshop, and we were like, what should we be? And we, you know, somebody said, hey, we should be a big data company, because it seems like that's what's attracting all the attention. But now actually it causes more confusion.
I think it's a huge problem for a lot of companies that really married themselves to it, and they're now trying to extract themselves. We talk about advanced telecom analytics. I mean, is that a term that would resonate for you? I mean, I guess, actually, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because your customer wins are with Tier 1.
Yes.
But you're expanding into other markets as well. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, our growth vectors are primarily three. You know, we have an existing set of customers, and one of the things about analytics is, you know, you can go in, you can solve a specific problem, and then you can expand. You can solve many, many problems if you have thought about your platform and your core technology in the right manner. And we can talk about how Guavus thinks about that. But, you know, so for us, there's an addressable opportunity, an addressable market opportunity just in our core customers, because that same platform can be leveraged for network engineering, for marketing, for customer service, for field operation optimization.
Right.
And therefore, there's an addressable opportunity there just in our existing customer base. But then if I look beyond that, you know, international is really exciting for, you know, I feel like the US mobile carriers were the first ones to see kind
Absolutely.
of the avalanche and the tsunami that the smartphone caused with VoLTE and so forth. And now every other operator is kind of following AT&T's
Right.
Domain 2.0 architecture. Every other
Right.
operator is following kind of what Comcast has done with their integrated media play. So I feel like the rest of the world will follow the US in some sense. And so we're seeing a lot of demand kind of internationally. And that's the second growth vector for us.
Right. So
We've started- That's right, geographic
yeah.
expansion. So we've started, you know, we're just finishing up a pilot with a pan-European carrier. We've got a number of our channel wins from Cisco, which is a channel partner of ours. We've had a number of wins in Africa and Middle East and
Wow.
in Southeast Asia. So that's geo, I think, is a very exciting space for us. And then the third area of expansion, so first was really more products around our core technology. Second was more geographies. The third area that we're excited about is this broad space of industrial IoT. And we can talk about IoT because IoT is what is becoming what big data was
Right.
3 years ago. Kind of
Right.
everybody's talking about it, but no one really knows what it exactly is.
I mean, that's really the truth, and it's an incredible case of history potentially repeating itself. We're at Light Reading, we're really digging in on IoT.
Yeah.
And actually, we've started to come up with, come across business cases which really make sense for
Yeah.
it. So I mean, I think it's not a bubble, but it's real. But tell me what you're finding out, and how can analytics help with the process of monetizing IoT?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should step back and probably define what analytics
Yeah.
means, you know, because as you said, it is a crowded space. It is somewhat noisy. The vocabulary even that's used in this space to describe the problems, you know, isn't precise, isn't accurate,
Right.
And certainly doesn't help customers make decisions. So the way that we look at this, and the way kind of, you know, we've had the privilege or the scars on the back of having been in the space before it became buzzword littered. But the way that we look at this is ultimately the whole purpose of analytics is to empower somebody to make a decision.
Okay.
So let's understand what the goal is. Analytics
Right.
is a means to an end. The
Right.
end is to make a decision.
Right.
So the way, if you want to empower somebody to make a decision, you need to understand what their business is. You need to understand what their workflow is. So the way that Guavus has looked at this space is we can talk about kind of analytics tools and technologies and platforms. But the real value is in the applications. The real value is having that vertical specific, domain specific application that a decision maker on the other side can use to make smart, intelligent, timely decisions.
Right.
And the way that happens is if, you know, the customer care agent who's only focused on resolving a customer's problem and reducing their average hold time, average call time, has the right metrics in the dashboard that they can use. The network engineer on the RAN side who wants to focus on improving service assurance on the RAN needs to have that specific domain, specific data sources, specific data science embedded in that application. So when we started off in the space, you know, we realized that analytics was not a shrink wrap kind of one size fits all. The real value was to build these applications. In order to build these applications, what you needed was a generic horizontal platform.
Right.
You needed a core technology which could take massive amounts of data that telcos have abundant supply of, really
Right.
coming from the network, coming from sensors, and then break down the silos by merging that data with other information sitting in data warehouses.
Right.
So the technical problem that Guavus really set out to solve was how can you take massive streams of data coming from the network, contextualize it with data that already exists in different silos inside a carrier to make timely operational decisions. That is the core of our technology. But the way that we went to market was we focused on these applications. So broadly, if I look at the analytics landscape, there's really two kinds of companies that exist today. One set of companies are the companies that are selling individual tools and technologies. The battery of your iPhone, for example. They're going in and saying, hey, I have a better way of storing this data. Hey, I have a better way of visualizing this data. Hey, I have a better way of computing and writing correlations on this data. And that's a technology sale that's typically sold to the IT organization inside a telco. The other kind
it's kind of a point version, point product.
That's exactly right, because everybody has realized, that the traditional business intelligence paradigm, the way, that all of us were trained, take data, put it onto disk, put it in a database, and once I've stored it, I can write my queries against it.
Yeah.
That was a traditional BI, and very successful companies were born in that space. But when you have to make timely decisions with massive amounts of data coming in at you, this store and query paradigm falls apart.
Right.
So people are recognizing that the traditional BI system, really traces its origins to the advent of the relational database, 1980s. That technology was great. It served its purpose for small amounts of data and quarterly or monthly decision making. But when I'm making decisions in the field, when I'm the customer care agent, when I'm the network engineer who has to optimize my network, when I'm the field service guy who has got to understand what's going on and react to it, when I'm the security operator that needs to make a decision right away with all the data, that paradigm doesn't work.
Right.
So as a result, a lot of these technology companies have been born that are trying to address some version of this stack. The other side of the house are companies that have really focused on specific domain applications, but have largely been reporting companies. So I can show you your top applications by device. I can show you this by that. And really where Guavus focuses on is we've got the platform and we have operational analytics. We're not really focused on reporting, let me tell you your top talkers. Everybody knows that, YouTube is the most important data consumption service provider, right? But what we have focused on is operational analytics that can get embedded into workflows, that can help people make timely decisions.
How much of it needs to be customized for different customers, and how much of it needs to be customized for different industries, and how much of it is sort of write once, read many, reusable code? Because I imagine you could end up with a business which didn't scale very well if everything had to be nuanced for every single iteration that you were selling.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In order to kind of execute to this productized solution model that I just kind of articulated to you, you need repeatability occurring somewhere in there. So what we have found is our core technology, our core platform is extremely repeatable. So it doesn't really matter if it's a DPI source of data or a NetFlow source of data. It's a timestamp and a bunch of features. So you can the last mile you can typically address through various adapters, but the core technology, the core platform is highly repeatable. The other part that's been really exciting for us is, when we started off, we didn't have that catalog of applications. We built it working with design partners. We built it with the first set of customers. Now what we're finding is great repeatability, because if you think about it, the problem that AT&T has is the same problem that Verizon has, is the same problem that Sprint has, is the same problem that Vodafone has when it comes to service assurance.
So really your customers helped you do the business development and paid you while they were doing it, which is a terrific model.
That's how we started off. I think we were a lot of these customers had real pain points. They had no other option.
But what they did was they brought you in as a partner, didn't they?
That's right.
Which is a new model in next generation communications now, is not this model of sort of I buy something, it must work immediately. It's I buy something and let's work on it together.
Correct.
And that's applying in many, many different spaces. So it applies in implementations of virtualization, for example. They're not going to work very well when they're first out of the box, but analytics is a great example of that. But it seems like, being at the pointy edge, end of the spear, as it were, a customer who comes to you today for a new vertical is getting the benefit of sort of 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years of experiential data and development. Let's talk about a specific, transportation. That's a market which Light Reading is very interested in, and lots of sort of mission critical networks like that. Give me an example of how you might help a transportation company to either increase operational efficiency or to make money. What would you do for them?
Yeah, so this is a very good question, because we've been doing a number of pilots with some of these logistics and transportation companies, and if you think about it, the problems that we've solved for the telcos is really tracking packets and associating those packets to something of business value, like a subscriber, right? Or a profitability score. So once you can take packets and assign some business metrics to it, you can do a lot of things with it.
Right.
You can see which packets are dropping, which packets are losing, where are the packets going, and then what is the impact on the subscriber experience. Now let me map that in the transportation world for you. So in transportation and logistics, what we're seeing is with the phenomenon of IoT and sensors kind of getting more and more pervasive, we're seeing a lot of these logistics companies. I'll give you a specific example of a company that we're working with, which is really in the pallet business. So they've got hundreds of millions of pallets, and if you think about their business, it's fundamentally driven by three metrics. Loss. If a pallet is lost, it's not good. I lost it. If a pallet is damaged, damage is the second metric. If a pallet is damaged, again, I got to go take it off circulation, take it to a recycling center, have the warehouse staff all the necessary parts and so forth.
Yeah.
And velocity, because how fast these pallets move through my supply chain fundamentally governs how much revenue I make.
Right.
Now imagine, and they've been running this business, which is a multi-billion-dollar business with no visibility into what exactly is going on. Now enter IoT. Drop prices of sensors, telcos participating in that through M2M. And now for the first time, you can start tracking pallets, where they are. You don't have to instrument all the hundreds of millions, even a good sample, a couple million, becomes interesting because you can track not only where the pallets are,
you can see the flow.
You can see if they're getting flipped, if they're getting shocked, so you can predict damage. And then what you do is you glue it with the ERP systems. So just like in the telco world, map a packet to a subscriber, put a name on the bit, so to say. In the transportation world, you take your ERP systems, which are legacy static kind of systems, and map it with this new kind of operational data that's becoming available. And now, for the first time, what we've been able to do is give these customers a view of exactly where these pallets are, and more importantly, operationally map it to damage, loss, and velocity. So for example, we've managed to predict using the fact that if a pallet is flipping or is being shocked, that it's very likely to get damaged. And we've managed to predict that with huge accuracy 30 days in advance. Now imagine what that does to your business process, because if I know these pallets are going to get damaged 30 days in advance, that's an actionable window for me. I can stock my warehouse for reverse parts. I can take that pallet out and send it through one more cycle. But this drastically and very immediately impacts the bottom line.
It's pretty exciting stuff, isn't it? And I really like, that was such an elegant explanation, because the analogy or the metaphor really makes sense to anybody who runs a network. Back in 1993, I wrote about a new luggage handling system at Denver Airport, and it was the first of its type, and it was a robot kind of system, so all the bags were handled by robots in the back, and of course it didn't work. And this was like in the days of ATM, and I wrote an article for Data Communications magazine saying, it's congestion control. We need some congestion control in Denver, and we need some congestion control in ATM, because they had the same problem, it was dropping all the cells. So these kind of physical to network analogies actually make perfect sense, but I imagine the kingmaker application for what you're talking about in terms of transportation would be containers on ships, right? Because that is essentially the currency of the 21st century, is massive shipping containers. I mean, there are millions, hundreds of millions of those around the world. Is that something you think that will end up being an application for Guavus?
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of this is, legacy systems.
Talk about efficiency there. You can save a company billions of dollars if you get that right.
Exactly. And that's the promise of analytics, right? The real promise is to actually end up solving billion-dollar problems, which you haven't been able to solve simply because you haven't had the right data across all the silos and the right decision makers.
Decision makers, culture, the sensor part of it, like sticking a sensor onto your package or your pallet or your container, is almost the most trivial part, isn't it? Because we know we'll get to a point where that technology is essentially free. I think you have to be talking to the right person. They have to have, the vision, and you have to have the right person talking to them. Don't you find that you have to close every sale yourself for Guavus right now? I mean, or can you really train somebody in this vision, a salesperson? I mean, I imagine that's a non-trivial task for the CEO of an analytics company.
Well, I spend a lot of time with customers. I really enjoy that. It's the best part of my job, really being customer focused, really understanding what they're hearing. And like you said, it's a really interesting time for the market. So, every CTO I talk to, every CIO I talk to, every CEO I talk to, I kind of get a perspective. So that's really exciting. But that said, from a Guavus business model perspective, as we were talking earlier, we've become very repeatable. We've got a sales process that's extremely repeatable because, like I said, the problems that AT&T has is exactly the same problems that Vodafone has. Of course, it's sculpted a little differently, but service assurance for large-scale complex networks, next-generation customer experience management, that isn't changing. So in order to get scale, and I'm sure you can appreciate this being kind of an entrepreneur yourself, in order to get scale, you have to figure out how to repeat the stuff that's actually really good and then channel it through.
Absolutely.
And we've been lucky on that side, both from being able to take kind of the first evangelical sales, productize that, templatize that, and then get the right channel partners. Samsung's a channel partner for us, Cisco's a channel partner for us. And with Samsung, we bet early in RAN, in the radio access network space. We thought that's a really important area for many of our customers. And as I was saying, our core technology allows us to mash all these different data sources together, so we can actually take data from the RAN, from the radio access network, and mash it up with data from the core, and mash it up with data from the set-top box, and really provide that end-to-end view of a subscriber. So I guess all to say, to come back to your question, I spend a lot of time with customers, really understanding kind of what their pain points are, and like I said, it's the best part of my job. But from a Guavus business model perspective, one of the things that we've seen is there is repeatability to be had in analytics. So we have productized a lot of our offerings, and we've got scale through our channel partners, and that's we're very excited about that. That's an area that we see ourselves kind of investing further in.
Do you find obviously you have case studies and use cases and things like that on specific applications. Do you get your customers together to talk to each other? Because I imagine the wisdom of the crowd is pretty important in analytics right now. I mean, surely they're looking to share common experiences of how to use analytics in that way. Do you get that community together underneath your umbrella, as it were?
Yeah, we've been talking about, we've had user conferences in the past, but these are not 10,000 people. These are 5 people that are kind of key, kind of ahead of their time in their organizations as well, and have seen what it takes to kind of start a big data program, but actually deliver value. And it's not just technology.
Yeah, they're putting their necks on the line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So,
absolutely.
And now I think we've got a core bunch of customers. In the mobile operator space, we're deployed at all the North American mobile operators. We're expanding internationally. So we think in the mobile space, we've got a very good set of customer base that can come together. Cable has actually been a really exciting kind of chapter for Guavus. We bet in cable probably 2.5 years ago, and today we're deployed at 7 of the top 8 cable operators,
and they're doing some remarkable things. They're not yesterday's cable operator anymore.
That's exactly right.
They're almost leapfrogging some of the incumbents in other types of service provider markets. So it's very interesting. Yeah, we've been tracking that as well.
Yeah.
So,
definitely an
nice surprise, though, right?
Yeah,
it's a nice surprise.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about the competitive set, and I think you did a good job of explaining the differences. But I mean, are the equipment vendors potentially a threat to your success? I mean, I'm talking about the mega ones, the incumbents, because they all claim to have strong analytics suites, whether they've developed them in-house or acquired them or partnered to get them. Does that muddy the waters for you? I mean, because it is difficult to compete with those massive companies when they're used to coming in and talking to a customer and saying, well, we're going to do the whole thing for you. How do you compete with that model?
Well, first of all, the very fact that all the equipment vendors now have a big data or analytics strategy is just a vindication of what customers have been telling us for the last 7-8 years. That said, so I think I don't think you could be an equipment provider for the modern age and not have an NFV or analytics story. You're irrelevant. But that said, I think customers, as I was saying, are now a lot more discerning, right? They've bought from the kind of the big SIs. They've bought from the equipment partners, and they're realizing that I don't know, as a customer, I don't really know what analytics is, and the person that I'm talking to also doesn't really seem to have a very good idea. So it's like we're both kind of learning together. Right. So where Guavus has been very successful is we've got out-of-the-box ROI, which we can walk in with. So we can go and say, hey, I'm going to save you 10% reduction in your truck rolls. Here is the solution, right? So it shortens the sales cycle. There's a broader kind of topic of where the equipment providers play in this space. We've been very fortunate. We've partnered with all the equipment providers because we look at them as a really valuable source of data.
Sure.
If you think about it, the reason that telcos have a big data problem is because networks are generating this data, and then you go down that path, and it's all the equipment providers that are really generating the data. But when I talk to every telco, what they are very, very focused on is we don't want to get only a single network view. I want to break down those silos. And this is where a lot of the equipment providers will struggle unless they take a multi-vendor approach.
Right. Well,
And that's really been successful for Guavus because we go in and we say,
because you are multi-vendor.
That's right.
Yeah. But in that sense, I mean, the future belongs to you, doesn't it? Because as we get white box networking and open source standards, and the future is multi-vendor, it's heterogeneous, it's supposed to be sort of a peaceable kingdom of equipment from lots and lots of different people, and that really plays to your strengths because you're ready for that now, right?
That's right. I mean, we think that's we like to think so, and we think that that's going to be a very exciting.
I'm doing your job. Maybe I should come and work in sales for Guavus because apparently I have.
Yeah, we have a couple of openings, please.
Yeah, exactly. No, it sounds like I'm sure it's a very exciting time for you. It seems like it's going very well, but
yeah.
There's been one of the sort of buzzy terms which has been going around in communications recently is this idea of data as currency. Do you think we've gotten to the point where analytics is enabling, say, mobile operators to look at data as currency, or are we some way away from realizing that dream still?
I think it'll eventually happen. I think every carrier has to go through the journey. You've got to crawl, then walk, then run. If you try and run before you crawl, you're not going to get very far. But ultimately, I mean, the whole promise of analytics and the whole promise of making smarter decisions is really along three themes, right? Help me save cost,
right.
Help me improve my customer service and differentiate myself with my customers because connectivity is free effectively, and help me make money. So what we are finding is certainly the save cost and customer operations is really very, very concrete ROI to be had. It's the current business. Monetization, on the other hand, really has two parts to it. There's the currency part that you refer to, which frankly is a business model innovation. There is work to be done over there, not necessarily from a technology perspective, but from a go-to-market. And do telcos get in the business of competing with Nielsen? Well, we saw that, and those weren't very successful successful programs largely. You don't see $1 billion kind of revenue streams coming out of telcos monetizing using that business model. That said, we have supported some of these monetization initiatives as telcos have experimented and started making some fairly significant bets on advertising, fairly significant bets on monetizing through industrial internet and IoT. So we think that eventually data is the currency. The challenge is not a technology challenge. The challenge is an ecosystem and business model challenge.
Right.
And that requires you to innovate rapidly, fail fast. So that's where we're seeing the market head towards, but there is clear ROI to be had just in the operational intelligence, operational maximization.
Well, it's like virtualization itself. It can save you money. It can make you money by making you more agile. So it's great to have a technology where you can walk in and you can say, well, it doesn't matter what we do with it. It's not going to cost you anything.
Correct.
But then your opportunity is so much more than that. I mean, talking of, well, first of all, let me ask you a question about culture and the fact that you're selling, a technology which enables innovation. Who do you have to sell it to? I mean, who's the principal decision maker that you're trying to reach or are reaching inside these large organizations when you're selling this product?
Yeah, so we have two kind of product families. One is our service assurance next-gen OSS set of products, where really the business case there is operational efficiency, cost optimization, and there we're almost always selling to the chief operating officer, the chief network officer, the chief technology officer inside these telcos who are typically running large networks and are worried about truck rolls and are worried about kind of cost efficiency to be had in their existing operations. That's one category. The second set of our products are really on the customer experience management, where we're taking that same network data, enriching it with other data sets to really provide targeted marketing support, targeted promotions, targeted subscriber profiling. And there, the business case is really around revenue uplift. How can I be smarter about promoting the right service at the right time to the right person?
So is that CMO?
Yeah, that's exactly. The buyer over there is the
CDO,
CMO. Exactly.
Chief Digital Officer.
Yeah, or the Chief Product Officer, so it's some version of that.
Yeah.
So those are the two stakeholders. When we start participating in these innovation programs, there's typically a VP of Big Data that's now being created by many of these telcos, and the VP of Big Data is pretty much a P&L owner of some sort, where they are tasked with, hey, go build a monetization service. Those are the guys that we actually partner with and say, hey, we bring in a platform, we bring in some expertise, and we can help you very rapidly test out a whole range of hypotheses and fail fast in the market versus spending 12 months trying to build a product and then find out, well, it really wasn't the right market business model fit. So largely the two stakeholders for bread and butter business is the CMO and the COO or the CTO or the CNO. And then,
but do you put them around the same table?
No, we have not put them around. That's a good, we haven't brought them together.
Because traditionally they don't like each other very much, but now the word is that they're getting on a little bit more than they used to. So I don't think it would be necessarily the best thing for you, though, because at the moment you get to sell them two products. I'm not being entirely serious, but I think there's a lot of changes going on internally in the organization of some of these companies now. I'm not quite sure where it ends up.
You know, where these guys do come together is increasingly we're seeing the CIO kind of participate when it comes to big data, because historically, if you think about it, analytics was really an IT function, right? Business intelligence, all of that sat there. Well, network generates the data. And as you know, network and IT haven't.
It's a huge theme right now. Is the network and the IT department starting to get some mutual respect for each other and realizing that they need each other in order to be a holistic business. Because these silos have to be broken down, right? You cannot. And so we're seeing the CIO embrace the big data kind of architecture story, and it's interesting because as I was saying, you know, in the last 7 months, we've had a lot of momentum in the business, primarily driven by the CIO, because the CIO has gone and bought a data lake, for example, you know, has bought a Hadoop distribution, and they're now asking the question, okay, great, I bought this piece of software, what do I do with it? How do I bring the data over here? Number one, how do I solve my data ingest at scale problem? But more importantly, what do I do with this data? Where are the applications? So they've solved the problem of storage. And if you think about the business cases really that have been built around data lakes, have been really around the idea that, hey, I can store a lot of data cost effectively. I don't have to store it in an expensive database somewhere. Right.
But then the next set of questions that every CIO is asking is, you know, the heavens didn't open up. You know, I didn't become a data company when I bought this Hadoop distribution. I need to have the applications. And that's where we're seeing a lot of pull, because we're focused on the applications from the founding of the company.
How is the whole shift towards virtualization and NFV, SDN, how is that impacting your business? I mean, is it a driver for you? Is it just something that you have to deal with? Is it a catalyst? Is it a good thing, or is it you know, make it live for me?
Yeah, absolutely. There's two ways, two things. And so the short answer to your question is we're absolute believers in that trend, and we're very excited about those trends because we think that'll be a force multiplier for the core analytics business as well. And the reason for that is twofold. Let's take NFV and SDN kind of separately.
Right.
Let's focus on SDN, and let me put that under the broader bucket of programmability. Right, software-defined X, which is really programmable environments. And here's where analytics fits in beautifully, and this was always the vision of Guavus, that ultimately the goal of analytics is to drive an operational decision. If the analytics is not operationalized, it stays in the hand of too few and doesn't really lead to any material changes. So what do I mean by operationalize? If I can detect something that's going on that's affecting a specific subscriber, and I can actually take an action back in the network, that is called closed loop decisioning. So software defined is I think part of a broader kind of theme that will happen, which is really more programmability. Policy got us there. Now you're seeing SDN. You know, the next generation of that will happen. But as networks become more and more programmable, I believe that, you know, networks will generate data. Networks will be able to take in intelligent decisions. But then you'll need a decision engine to actually glue the three things together, and that's the role that Guavus plays. And we're seeing a lot of our use cases today really become, hey, can I now take a policy decision back in the network? Can I now trigger an IVR signal back in the customer service side? Can I now automate a marketing campaign? These are all artifacts of a broader phenomenon called programmability. So that's on the one side. Now let's take NFV. what's going to happen is it's been hard enough running networks. Now what's going to happen is you're going to get services that can be spun up on demand, and the complexity of managing these services.
It makes perfect sense.
I mean, forget culture problems. You got IT guys trying to run network guys trying to understand IT. So that's one set of challenges that has to happen. But more importantly, the technology to kind of constantly track.
You've launched it. What's happening?
Exactly.
Is it working, and how are people using it, and now do that on the fly? I hadn't even thought about that. That's a really obvious driver for what you were doing. So actually, the sooner that it happens, the better for you. Really.
That's right, because analytics is a key pillar of next generation OSS. Next gen OSS systems were always built for react. Something broke. Let me go look at what happened.
Yeah.
Right. Well, when you have lots of VMs getting spun up, a lot more dynamism in the problem, you have to be a lot more proactive.
Yeah.
And so you can't think of analytics as separate from OSS. They go together, and next-gen OSS will actually have analytics as a core pillar, largely driven by the phenomenons of NFV that we were just talking about.
What do you think is the future for your company? Because, I mean, obviously you are going through a period of significant success. At what point are you going to be profitable? And what's ultimately the goal? Do you want to IPO? What do you want to happen to Guavus? Where do you see yourself in 3 years' time, if I can use a cliched question?
No, it's been a tremendous ride, and I feel that we've barely scratched the core market. And so I'm a big believer in the broader market forces, and I feel that we have a shot as any other company to be the next SAP, to be the next Oracle, because the next set of companies will arise in this confluence of multiple market trends that we've been talking about.
Right.
As a business, we've been investing for growth. So we just closed a round of fundraising. We're continuing. Our investors are very bullish about the broader market opportunity, and we see ourselves continuing to invest along those three growth vectors that I talked about: more geographies, more market segments, and more products. So that remains the kind of overall kind of growth vectors for the business. And specifically on profitability, on our core programs, we're already profitable, and I think by the end of this year we'll be cash flow positive. But like I said,
and that's the plan.
That's
right?
the plan. Yeah.
So that's the most important thing. If you're fulfilling the plan, if you're on track, that's what matters, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I feel confident that there is a broader business to be built here. Whether it's IPO or what that looks like, it's a secondary question. But I think there's a business to be built here. I think the market's there. We feel like we've got the right kind of investors behind us, and we're investing for growth and doing it in a profitable kind of manner.
Yeah, good for you. I've been looking forward to this interview, I have to tell you, since for quite a while now, for a number of reasons, one of which is that you're sort of the anti-froth analytics company. I mean, this is really sort of hard-nosed solutions for real day-to-day problems in some of the largest networks in the world, and you're obviously having real success. But also, I really wanted to sit down with you, and it's a privilege for me to hear about how analytics can help these companies from somebody who really has, developed this from scratch, as you say, from your PhD. And, I want to say, I think you do a fantastic job of making this technology come to life for people. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. I got a lot out of it. I learned a lot. So, thank you.
You're very kind. Thank you.
And great job. We're really excited to track what happens with Guavus over the next few years.
Look forward to staying in touch.
Thanks, Anukool.
Cheers.
Our customers compete with anyone when it comes to hyperscale and efficient hardware.
How do you lead that?
Number one reason the company fails is they don't get market transitions.
Absolutely. I think the industry is going through a tremendous transformation.